Welcome everybody again. It's a beautiful day here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire on the New Hampshire seacoast. I hope it's nice where you are, and we really appreciate you joining us again. A lot of you are back again, and some of you are new here, so welcome to everybody. I am Jeremy D'Entremont. I'm the U.S. Lighthouse Society historian, producer and host of the Society's podcast, Lighthearted. And also with us today is the U.S. Lighthouse Society's Executive Director, Jeff Gales. Jeff will be helping with the Q&A after the presentation. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Welcome to our 5th tour retrospective event. Again, we really appreciate you being here. Some of you have been to the previous ones. Some of you have been to all of them, and the feedback has been great. I've gotten some really nice emails from a lot of you, so that's very much appreciated. Once again, I'll just say it one more time for now. I have a request. Just make sure you keep your microphones muted until we get to the Q&A period. When we get to the Q&A, we'll explain how that works. Also, again, do not share your screen. If you do that, well, we all see it. Again, only Skip should be sharing the screen. Today's presenter is, again, Skip Sherwood. Some of you were here for his presentation a couple of weeks ago. That was for the Brittany tour. Today, Skip will be giving us a look back at the 2016 tour in Wales and the Isle of Man. I'm not going to say really anything about the lighthouses or the places, because I know Skip has that all covered. They saw some amazing lighthouses and other attractions on the tour, like all the tours. And any tour that includes a visit to the Beatles Museum in Liverpool, along with dozens of great lighthouses, it has to be pretty special. And with Skip and Mary Lee leading it, I know it's special. I have not seen Skip's presentation in advance. I'm looking forward to it. Just quickly, the domestic and international tours that the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers are a big part of what makes the organization so special. The proceeds go to support lighthouse preservation and education, and the tours are not just about lighthouses, as you'll see. You'll also learn a tremendous amount about the culture and communities where the lighthouses are located. It's always the case. Let me introduce Skip. Skip and his wife, Mary Lee Sherwood, began volunteering for the Society in 2007 from their home in Fresno, California. In late 2008, they moved to Kingston, Washington to work full-time at the U.S. Lighthouse Society's new headquarters at the Point No Point Lighthouse. Over the next 8 years, they became known as Team Sherwood as they developed and led 20 USLHS tours around the US and the British Isles. Skip, a retired logistics professor, sometime he has to explain to me what that means exactly, but anyway, a retired logistics professor was in charge of creating the itineraries and dealing with the lighthouses, while Mary Lee, a retired grade school teacher, was responsible for accommodations and meals. And Mary Lee is well known as the doting tour mother. I did a 20-day tour in England and Scotland with them in 2017, the summer of 2017. Hard to believe it's more than 3 years ago now. I can't say enough about the job Mary Lee and Skip did running that tour. It was absolutely amazing. Currently, Skip and Mary Lee continue to volunteer. They're the driving force behind the Society's very successful Lighthouse Passport stamp program. They now live in Bonnie Lake, Washington. I interviewed Skip about the Lighthouse Passport program on one of the recent episodes of the podcast, Lighthearted, and that's episode number 56, if you want to look that up. Those of you who don't know, the podcast, Lighthearted, is available through Apple Podcasts and other podcast apps, and also at news.uslhs.org, the news blog on the Society's website. In a couple of minutes, as Skip gets started, I am going to post the map of Wales and the Isle of Man, the tour map. I'll post it in the chat as a file that you can download, and also post a link if you prefer to click on the link and download it from the link. I'll post it both ways in just a few minutes. So with that, I am going to turn the show over to Skip. So Skip, it's all yours.
Okay, let me get my screen up here that I need. Okay. Well, first of all, it's good seeing a lot of you there that we haven't seen for a while. We saw Keith Morton, our friend from England, that has helped us a couple of times on trips over in that part of the world. This one was very interesting to me simply because I really knew very little about the Isle of Man. Well, didn't know much about Wales either. And these mottos of each of these countries is shown right here. We'll talk about the Triskelion, which is the three-legged symbol that's for the Isle of Man later on. But to get us started, the country of Wales has about 3 million people. They speak English and Welsh. About 500,000 people still speak Welsh in that country. And it was our fortune to have a tour guide that spoke Welsh, because without her, we would have been pretty much lost, especially when you get into more rural areas where you're kind of really looked at a foreigner if you don't speak the language. But to start, I'd just like to point out why lighthouses were so important in this country and on the Isle of Man. But in the 19th and 20th century, Wales was a top exporter of coal, and the cities of Cardiff, did I do that? I hope not. The cities of Cardiff down here and Barry were the two largest coal exporting ports in the world in the early 1900s. And other towns like Swansea and Milford Haven, which is here, and up here at Fishguard, which is a kind of a rail connection to London, were very important ports. And obviously with the importance of the sea traffic, it was important to have lighthouses. It's covered obviously on three sides by water: the Irish Sea on the north and on the west, the Bristol Channel on the south, and the Severn Estuary, which also causes more issues for water traffic simply because of the tidal ranges. Now, if you were with us for the Brittany trip, you know that there were some substantial tidal ranges there, but the Severn probably has the second highest tidal ranges in the world, only to the Bay of Fundy. Some of their ranges as high as almost 50 feet. And of course, when you have tidal ranges, it exposes rocks and shelves and shoals and sand and all that kind of stuff. And so as a result, lighthouses become even more important. One thing that was totally different than this one that we did in Brittany is Brittany had all those really tall lighthouses, but the topography in Wales is a little more like Western United States down in California. High cliffs, so that you weren't, the lighthouses weren't on, right near the water. They had high focal planes, but the lighthouses themselves are pretty short. And as a matter of fact, if you look at this list of some of the ones we'll look at today, like the Great Arm Lighthouse, the tower is only 37 feet, but it had a focal plane of 325 feet. And we had nothing like that the last time we looked at Brittany. And some of these others, you can see the substantial high focal planes, but the towers not being all that tall. So, the style of lighthouse is pretty much different. One last note about lighthouses: the Trinity House in England is responsible for the Wales lighthouses, and the Northern Lighthouse Board of Scotland is actually responsible for the lighthouses on the Isle of Man, and we'll get to that later on, why that's the case. This is the map that Jeremy talked about that has the list of lighthouses along with, the identifying where, they are. On the left here is our badge there, or patch that we use for this particular tour, designed by Mary Borkowski, who also, of course, does the journals and the map. If we look, we take this map and we divide it into 4 little humps. These are the 4 areas that we're going to talk about. First area down here, which is the Severn Estuary and the beginning of the Bristol Channel. This area down here, which involves Swansea and Milford Haven. All the lighthouses with the little that are lit up so to speak, are the ones that we're going to show photos of as we went around. Then the area up here, which where traffic comes in from Ireland into Liverpool or from Scotland, and then finally the Isle of Man. Well, we started out in this case in the city of Bristol in England, and if you've never been to Bristol or if you ever get through there, that's a fascinating city all by itself. It has all kinds of interesting history museums and whatever. My favorite was to go to it was called the Langness Trove, which was where Robert Louis Stevenson supposedly wrote or partially wrote Treasure Island. And I thought it was ironic that, that we visited that before we went on the tour and then realized, it was his family's, Stevenson's in the family that designed virtually all the lighthouses on the Isle of Man. But to begin with, 2 small lighthouses here at the River Usk, taking you into Newport, the Flatholm Island Lighthouse, which obviously is there because there's an island right in the middle of this channel, and the Nash Point High and Low Lighthouses, which were established there to guide the ships through the channel and towards Cardiff and Bristol. The first 2 lighthouses, the first one was pretty small, but this one actually still is an active lighthouse at East Usk. The more interesting one, this is a photo of it from across the river. When you get closer to it, you find that you have a very interesting one because it has a completely circular base, which is also the keeper's quarters, and of course the lantern room on the top. And I'd never seen one like this, where basically the keeper's quarters is circular. And again, not a very tall lighthouse, but then it was there just to guide ships into the river there. We actually got a chance to get inside this. The owner, we got there at a time, it's a bed and breakfast now, and the owner was kind enough to let us go inside because he was changing the sheets on the beds and stuff. And we were able to go in and see what it looked like on the inside. And it was kind of interesting because it kind of reminded me of the lighthouses when you go inside and they built desks and things which follow the curve of the tower. In this case, the bedrooms, followed the curve of the bottom part of the lighthouse. And you can see that here in this particular bedroom. So it was, it was a really interesting, we just thought it'd be a little short trip, but a little short visit, but by being allowed inside, it made a lot of difference. This lighthouse was actually designed by a gentleman by the name of Frank Walker, who actually designed 19 different lighthouses in Wales. One of the things that when you're on a tour with us, there's something we always try to make sure of is, and after we've been away from bathrooms for a while, we always try to schedule a bathroom stop. And we had, and as they say, the best laid plans of mice and men oft go astray. And what happened here is we had scheduled a bathroom stop at this Millennium Center in Cardiff, thinking, well, hell, there's not going to be anybody there. And we ran into a graduation. Oh my God, there was about, I don't know, there had to be like 5,000 people there. And we tried to push our way through all these people to get to the bathrooms. And of course, all the women's bathrooms were jammed because women getting all gussied up before the graduation. Oh, hell, it was a nightmare. And that's the best way to start a tour, is on a nightmare. But in this particular case, we managed to push through it and ended up down on what was called Mermaid Quay, which is a very festive area on the waterfront. There's an old customs house in the background, a lot of shops, a lot of restaurants, and a pretty nifty carousel back here, which up close looked like this. Supposedly the only Welsh-themed carousel in the world, and I wasn't sure why. So you notice on the left-hand corner it says Wales on the back, but if you look at the horses, all the horses have Welsh names, which made it more Welsh, I guess, but a very festive place. This is where we were to load into ribs, boats to take us out to Flatholm Island, and we looked at these and said, okay, this doesn't look too bad. And then you had a choice. You could either, on the left, you could sit on a bench, or on the right, you could sit on one of these things. It was like riding a horse. And so you really weren't sure which one was going to be more comfortable. We had to go in 2 shifts because they had 2 boats and we had enough for 3. But as you'll notice down here in the lower right, there's a pretty good ride out here to the island itself. Of course, we had to get all gussied up in rain gear and life jackets and everything. Here's Bill and Peggy all ready to go, and then everybody climbing into these ribs. And it wasn't too bad. I mean, the weather seemed pretty good, but you can see it was probably cool. Everybody's got hoods on. They were just getting ready for, going out into the wild here. And again, going out wasn't bad, but you got to remember we were in a harbor, and we had to travel through a lock because of the difference in the sea levels and because of the tides. And everything was nice and cool until we got out here. And then it got pretty wild, and you can see it's all wet up here. I think this is Don Broadbent here with his head down. It got pretty nasty going out there, but it was a lot of fun. And when we finally got to the island, we ran into this, which the tower was encased in scaffolding as they were, restoring it. And we knew this ahead of time. We're kind of disappointed. It was also the reason they didn't let us land on the island and actually go to the lighthouse, which wouldn't have been, all that great with all that scaffolding on it. But again, you can see a lantern up here with a red sector, which again, guiding ships away from this island. But if we had gone at a different time, it was supposed to look like this. So again, I was like to find out later on, well, what would we have actually seen if it hadn't been covered in scaffolding. Actually, after this day, which took up most of the day, we spent the night in Cardiff, and then the next day we took a tour of Cardiff Castle. Now, if you've been to, Scotland, Ireland, England, lots of castles, and a lot of them are in ruins with just pieces of them left. This one was built in the 11th century, supposedly by William the Conqueror, but obviously it has been renovated and added to over the years, and actually in the 18th and 19th century, a lot was added to it. While we were there, they were getting ready to film, I can't remember, some TV show, or they were going to have some big event going on here, which always makes for, great photos of ancient castles to have these stages or whatever they were there. One of the things I thought was pretty nifty about it was the castle keep. It was this 12-sided building, and a keep was always used as the last refuge. So, when the enemy was attacking, it's where, you went in there and hunkered down and hopefully survived the enemy attack. We actually were able to go into this and climb up to the top. Another interesting piece of the tower there, the clock tower, which was, if you went all the way around, it had all these interesting astrological signs. The one on the left is Venus, on the right is Mercury, all these heraldries on the top, made for something that was really interesting to photograph. Inside, there was so much, not even going to get into that. The thing I liked the most was the kids' room. This was the children's room with the painted around the top were nursery rhymes, or characters from nursery rhymes, or nursery stories or kids stories or whatever. This was an example, and indicating underneath them what the nursery rhyme was. That was really an interesting one. And then of course you had to have a small dining room for your intimate dinners, some interesting sculptures on the walls, and again, just an awful lot. This was one of those things we could have spent a lot of time there. But it was very interesting because of the the renovation that had actually been done. Later that day, we went to the Nash Point High and Low Lighthouses. Again, if you look back at our map up here, these are ships coming around this curve through the Bristol Channel and into the channel to get to Cardiff. On the right was the low lighthouse. On the left, the high lighthouse, the fog signal building here, and all the keepers' houses here. The obviously the lantern room's been taken off the low lighthouse. Here's a good photo of the high lighthouse and the service buildings below it. We were able to get in this one, climb it, and got a pretty good view of, you know, the rest of the property. Again, with the fog signal down here, along with the low lighthouse. Some of these keepers' houses were for rental. I don't remember. I think they were these down here that you could. A number of the lighthouses we ran into on this tour had been turned into vacation rentals or bed and breakfasts. We had the opportunity of them. They blew this horn for us, and they told us, you know, don't get too near it. And it was loud. I mean, just look at the size of the trumpet on this thing. And inside, they, you know, let us, you know, they fired up the machinery to build up the compressed air to blow this, and it was loud. Some of us took a video so we could get the noise, but I wasn't able to figure out how to do that on this PowerPoint. There's one of those situations. I always like again, a desk like this that's actually carved and built to fit around the inside of a curved room like they have in lighthouses. And then this was our guide there showing us in his right hand the bulb that they use now, in his left hand, you know, the bulb that they used to use, and the one in his right hand providing just as much powerful light as the one in his left hand, which you know, kind of gives you an idea how technology has changed. One of the things we had to get a little bit used to when we were on this tour are the signs along the way. Most of the signs, road signs, were both in English and in Welsh. Welsh is an extremely difficult language. Lots of words without vowels, which are really hard to say. We did run into this sign, which we thought was kind of interesting, you know, that it was 2¼ miles this way and 2¼ miles the other way to the same town. And then I figured after it must have been like a circle. You know, it's the only way they could have, you know, had this sign, but again, showing the difference in the two languages. They put this up for some of us as we were going through Wales. Never seen these before. I guess this is just you're supposed to yield to old people, you know. And this, you didn't have to have men and women signs. You know, this was on a lot of the men's room signs along the way. And then there, you know, our guide tried very hard to get us to learn a little bit of, you know, a few things like good morning and thank you. My favorite one down here is the word for beer. I mean, CWRW, how the hell do you pronounce a word with no vowels? I mean, and of course, it turned out after 4 or 5 beers, you could pronounce it. It would just come out, and that was, you know, that was the word for beer. It was important to learn the word for toilet too. What a number of the lighthouses we saw, their lenses were still rotating on Mercury, and you know, and saw these signs, which of course you don't see many in the United States. Okay, our second group of lighthouses is in this area, beginning over here in Swansea. The Mumbo's Lighthouse and the Helwick Lightship were out here helping guide ships into this particular port. Cardiff Island, again, a lighthouse on an island to you know, warn people about where that island is coming into Tenby. These 3 lighthouses out here, the St. Anne's Lights and Skulkam Island, again for guiding ships in this particular case into Milford Haven, which at one time was a very important deep water port because of coal and other mining products that came out of this particular area. And that port was extremely important back when they built these lighthouses. And then finally up here at Stronghold Head, Fishguard, again, was a port for ships coming from Scotland, and then rail picking it up here and taking it across down to England. So starting down here in the lower right-hand corner at Mumbo's Lighthouse, this one was built in the late 1700s. This one was only accessible at low tide. It actually was low tide when we were there, and you could have gotten out to part of this, but we tried to discourage people from walking out there. It's interesting, the term Mumbo's is from a French term, mamelle, which means breasts, and that's what these two little islands out here resemble, and that's where the name of the Mumbo's Lighthouse came from. Leave it up to the French to come up with something like that. The tower wasn't much to it, but you know, it's interesting sometimes why they look like they do. This thing originally didn't have the lantern on top, and they had two open coal fires on it. Well, evidently that didn't work out too well, and it was replaced by this single light up here after a while. But explained why this thing had these baskets around them, which at one time actually held the fires. We saw a couple of lightships. The Helwick lightship, which is in Swansea, was, like I said, was stationed out on an area where evidently there were some sandbars, and this guided ships away from that. The thing I always find interesting is some of the lightships in England, more so than the United States, had these very substantial towers. Most of the lightships in the United States, you know, just sort of have like a mast with a light on top, but these lightships had a pretty substantial tower, and in this one we could, you know, climb up into the tower itself. Actually, this lightship, when at one time was, you know, belonged, well, obviously Trinity House, but it actually spent most of its time up in northeast England, where it was rammed a couple of times by different vessels, and it was eventually moved down here, not to, I mean, like in the 1970s, to warn people about that sandbar in the Bristol Channel. So again, and here's another look at that tower holding that particular light. Next, we went to the town of Tenby. This was, and again, all along this coast, you know, very interesting little towns, painted, you know, in these pastel colors. And this was supposed to be, this was our home base for a couple of days, and a trip out to Caldy Island. That's an island just off the coast here with history going back about 1,500 years, and it's known as one of the holy islands of Britain. It only has like 40 permanent residents, but it also has a monastery of Cistercian monks that migrated here from Belgium in the early 20th century. Today, the monks farm the island, they raise sheep and cattle, they make cheese, chocolate, and perfumes. And of course, we were all cranked up because we were going to go out there and be able to buy chocolate and monk perfume, whatever that is. And so the morning of when we were supposed to go out here, this is what happened. The weather was pretty funky. You know, the boat was not running. And this is what you do on a tour when you're waiting for the boat. And we spent a lot of time sitting at this lighthouse waiting for the word about, you know, when we could go. At some point they said, well, we should be able to go in the afternoon, and turned us loose. So we wandered around town and went down to one of the Royal National Lifeboat stations. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution in England is really funded by legacies and donations, and manned mostly by unpaid volunteers. But they've been around since the early 1800s, and right now there's like over 200 stations around the country. They have 440 some odd boats, and I wrote this down. They said since 1824, they've actually saved 142,000 lives. And so it was really an interesting side trip to see how they launch these boats and bring them back up into these, you know, covered buildings, and how they actually launched them when they were needed. Well, we finally got on our way out to Bardsey Island. As you can see, the weather hadn't improved a whole lot. Again, people kind of bundled up, but you know, everybody getting ready to take their photos once they get out there. This is about the best picture I could get. Again, remembering that they're trying to, you know, that this lighthouse with the red sector in the lens to try to make sure that you know, that it guided ships into the you know, around this particular lighthouse. Now, if we had been able to get on the island, this is what it looked like. This is what we advertised, and of course, we're not able to produce. But you know, weather is something is not our friend sometimes on these tours. And then this is a picture of the monastery of this Cistercian monks on this island. And so this is just in case you get there, this is what you'd be able to see. Our next lighthouses were over at the St. Anne's lighthouses, both a high and low light there. These are the ones that guided the ships into Milford Haven, again, which was a railhead terminal, shipbuilding area, primarily because evidently it was a very good deep water port. These lighthouses, the current lights there were built in 1832. This one is the highlight. The original lantern room was removed. This observation building was put on there during World War II as a watchtower, if you will, watching for German U-boats. So that's why it looks like this. The buildings underneath now are a vacation rental, and actually the highlight does not have a light in it anymore. Only the low light. The vacation rental runs about £1,000 a week, all the way up to a couple of thousand, I guess, depending upon the time of the year. This is the low light, had a first order Fresnel lens in it. Again, one of these ones with a relative focal plane of about 160 feet, but the lighthouse itself is only about 40 feet high. Now you talk about keepers' houses, there's that same light right there, and they really had what looked like, you know, as many as 5, maybe 6 keepers' houses if you just look at the smokestacks up here. These were all unused right now. Not sure what they're planning on doing with them, but I'd never seen quite such a large complex. Must have taken quite a few keepers. Of course, they had a foghorn which had to be tended to, along with the light in this particular case. The next trip out in the water was to Skulkam Island, which again primarily guided traffic from Ireland into that Fishguard Harbor. Now, this was a kind of a trek just to get down to where the boat was, as you can see here. But this gives you an idea of the tidal range in this area. If you look up here where these boat bumpers are, or where these tires are, that's how high the water can get, and where the boat would actually, you know, come in here and you'd be able to go right on it. We obviously were there at low tide, and going down this ramp was not exact. I mean, you know, it had like a carpet on it. You had to be pretty careful because it was pretty steep. Now, this was not our boat, thank God, because no telling what would have happened if we had to go out in that. And so this, again, I point this out because you can see the impact of the tidal range. And when you're planning a tour, you know, the tidal range has a lot to do with your scheduling, because the boats themselves will only go at certain times. And I should mention, when we went to Brittany, if you remember, we were on all these, regularly scheduled ferries. When we went to Wales and the Isle of Man, we were at the mercy of these boatmen, if you will, that had these very small boats, and they kind of did their own thing, and they would dictate pretty much when and where you should meet them, and you just prayed they showed up. When we got out to the island, again, this is Skulkam. It's a small island, very small island. Notice the total absence of any vegetation or trees, probably just because the winds are so high. Go up closer. This whole island is as you can see here, is kind of a red sandstone. But again, it was primarily there just to guide ships into a harbor. Again, a very high focal plane, but the tower being relatively short. The last one in this group was at Stronghold Head. This was another one that was guiding ships from Ireland, sitting high up on a cliff. Again, a relatively, short lighthouse. This one was kind of interesting to get to. It actually sits on a little island, and you had to cross this bridge down here before first of all, you had to climb down to get to the bridge, and then climb up the stairs to get up to the lighthouse. This bridge actually had locks on the gates, and we were lucky enough to have Trinity House let us through to get in. And it was a pretty good hike to get up all these stone stairs to the top. When you got to the top, the lighthouse again pretty much looked like some of the other lighthouses that we had encountered. At a first order Fresnel lens, this is one where it was floating on a bath of mercury. It had a clockwork mechanism that at one time, was wound by hand. And it was kind of funny because you think, normally these clockwork mechanisms, had these long 100-foot drops that would turn the lens. This one had a relatively short one, but it had a 500-pound weight that was used to turn that lens, which of course gives you an idea of the weight of the lens, and only had to be wound once every 12 hours. But I was just thinking, winding a 500-pound weight even once in 24 hours was probably a pretty good challenge. Before we move to part 3, one more thing here. This was inside the tower, and you've seen foghorns, but this was really interesting. All these speakers, all these electric wired speakers were part of the current fog signal. We didn't get to hear this, but found it interesting that it had so many speakers for the foghorn. This is a look inside the lens at the top. Notice it's got the bulbs that rotate when one burns out. Also, at the end of this, the steps to get up this, although it was relatively short, was interesting because it had the hand holes in the steps as you climbed up into the lantern room. And on the way back, you started up here, went down the stairs, crossed the little chasm there, back up the stairs, and of course the coach was up here somewhere, giving you some idea of the trek that was necessary here. Now we can go to the food. Wales is not a big agricultural country. The soil isn't all that rich, so they have more livestock, sheep, cattle, and lamb is one of the staples in Wales. A Welsh caul is their national dish, which can be made with lamb or beef, but it's like a stew made with vegetables, and this one was with lamb. Of course, we had to sample it because they're a national dish. They said that it's often better after a couple of days because the flavors tend to get more melded together. A lamb bruja, which is an Indian dish, but one we ran into because of the lamb. This was my favorite. there was a meal we had of lamb and minced sausage. The beef was obvious in some of the meals, with the beef pies, steak and mushroom pies, much more like you find in in England, and pasties, which of course are very common in England. My favorite was what they called the hog duvet, which was a pasty which was made with pork. But I just love the name. This is sort of what happens at night when you're sleeping there with your wife. Somebody's always hogging the duvet. Then of course you couldn't be anywhere near England without some strawberry scones and clotted cream. This was actually at a place on the Isle of Man, where I learned what a bap is. I didn't know what a bap was. It's the equivalent of a sandwich, and the Isle of Man is very well known for kippers and Manx crabs. And we had a crab sandwich. I did not eat this. I just took a picture of one that somebody had. I didn't look. It didn't look all that appetizing to me. Okay, now into part 3, which takes us into Liverpool. We started down here at Bardsey Island, which again, as being on an island off the end of Aberdaron down here, which guides ships around that peninsula. The South Stack, Point Langness Lighthouse, Great Orme, all of these up here really guiding ships over into Liverpool. Anglesey is actually an island in this particular area, so you had to cross a bridge to get into it, the bay on this side. So again, we're starting down here at Bardsey Island, where here's an example of one of those boatmen who, using his ingenuity because of the relative difference in tides, just had a little tractor here and a trailer, and he puts his boat on that, and then he hauls it out of the water, and then you get together and you climb into it, and then they just push the tractor back. Tractor just pushes it back in the water, and this was really a kind of a complex operation because this is the only guy we could find to take us out there. Of course, everyone wanted to go, so we had to take 3 trips. And when you weren't on a trip, you were back at a visitor center quite a ways away, which required a separate coach to get us down to where we got on this particular boat. But the big problem was the fog. Actually, when you got there, this was a picture. I can't remember who gave this one to me. I'm not sure. I think that might be Marge right there. But anyway, the fog was pretty bad for the first group that went out, and you could just barely see the lighthouse. By the time the second group went out, the fog kind of started to lift, and so they were able to get actually pretty good pictures of it that looked maybe a little more like this. I was in the first group, didn't see hardly anything. The third group lucked out and was able to get pretty good photos of the light. So once again, seeing how I didn't get a very good picture of it, this is what it looks like if you were actually on the island. We wanted to go on the island, but the problem was, and we probably could have gotten permission, but because we would have had to have taken 3 trips out there, I mean, it would have taken a day and a half just to do the boat trips out there if you wanted to spend any time on the island at all. When we went up here to Anglesey, we went in a counterclockwise direction and went to Point Linus first here, lighthouse on this point out here. And evidently, this particular lighthouse was used as a place where ships would stop and pick up pilots, which would then take them, into Liverpool and the Mersey River. And so it served a purpose other than just being, a lighthouse. It was pretty elaborate complex surrounded by a brick wall and had this kind of nifty arch walkway to get into it. But an interesting light because the lantern is actually on the ground level, and the watch room was on top of it. So unlike, virtually every other lighthouse, which has a watch room, which is below the lantern room, this one has the watch room above it. This place was actually for sale when we were there for something a little over £1 million. I don't know whether it ever sold. Remember, this was in 2016, so it could have sold by now. Kind of an interesting place. Probably if they could buy it, turn it into one of those vacation rentals. Again, a relatively high focal plane with a relatively short tower. We managed to get a photo of everybody in front of the archway getting into Point Linus here. This was the next lighthouse at South Stack. This is one of the most visited lighthouses in Britain. It has, in order to reach it, again, it sits on a little island. There's a footbridge that crosses down here. There are 400 steps, virtually all of them stone steps from the top down to the bottom. And then when you finally get to the lighthouse, if you're lucky enough to be able to climb it, it's another 100 steps. And those 400 down also means 400 back up. Now, this picture was, part of our promo. When we got to South Stack, this is what it looked like. And we thought, oh my. And we said, oh, hell's bells, nobody's going to want to go down here. First of all, you can't even see your way down there. But there was a hearty group of them, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen or so. I'm not sure, there's 10 of them that decided that they would brave it. And I thought, well, hell, even if I get down there, I can't get a good picture of the lighthouse. So we went up on a hill and hung out up there and then waited. And after a little while, we saw this. We thought, oh boy, now we're really getting to see it. We waited a little longer, and then it started looking like this. And we waited a little longer, and it looked like this. And I don't know what happened to those people. I thought they never made it, because when I took these photos, nobody was in these pictures. And finally, and this was a matter of, 45 minutes, maybe an hour at the most, as we waited and waited for that fog to clear, and eventually we're able to get this photo. And I thought, well, I'm glad I didn't go down there just to get the photo. But then, of course, I didn't have the opportunity to climb this particular tower. You can see the fog signal building out here. I know Mary and Phil are on watching. I know they went down to this. I can't remember who else actually made this particular trip. Ooh. Oh yeah, Leanne's brother-in-law, and I don't know whether she went on this or not, but I know Nate would, because he would climb anything. And so that was our story at South Stack. Before we get over towards Liverpool, we went to the Great Arm Lighthouse, and as we came up the hill on Anglesey here, they stopped and we took this picture, and we just thought this was some castle somebody built up there. So, well, that's not a lighthouse. There's no tower. There's no keepers. Well, I guess it could have been keepers' houses, but we didn't think that was the lighthouse. And the guy on the bus said, "Yeah, that's the lighthouse." And so okay. And we got up closer and looked at it and said, "That's not a lighthouse," because we'd known that it was a bed and breakfast now, because we'd been in contact with Fiona, who was the owner, and she had said if we came at the right time, we'd be able to get inside. So it's got to be a lighthouse somewhere. And then that's the other side of it. Now, does that look familiar? It's almost a carbon copy of the one back there at Point Linus, with the lantern room on the ground, and again, the watch room up here. And we were able to go on the grounds and wander around and go inside. Again, we were lucky enough that we were there late enough in the morning that she was, that the guests had left and they were just doing the cleaning. And this is what it looks like from the lantern room now. The going in, I mean, it was really beautiful. I mean, with the paneling and everything to go into the lighthouse where the guests would go in. little sign over here with the phone number if you want to stay overnight. And then if you went inside, there's Wanda inside the lantern room itself, which had a number of seats and chairs, a telescope that you could just sit in there and hang out. I don't know if oh yeah, when we were there, this was 90 pounds a night to stay here. And I thought that was pretty reasonable for, you know, for the view that you would be able to get. And outside they had a hammock and chairs and everything. That was really a nice place to spend some time. On the way back from, again, here's that island of Anglesey. If you come over here, right over where by this bridge is, if you can see the name of this town right here, this is the name of the town. Now try pronouncing that. However, the real total, this is the name of the town on maps, but the actual name of the town is this, which is the longest name of any town, incorporated town in the world. And Sarah, our guide, said it for us, but of course that didn't mean anything. And so we learned that this is what it meant. So the name of the town, Church of the Mary in the hollow of the White Hazel near the fierce whirlpool, and the Church of Cilio by the Red Cave. So that's what that town name means. And we had, you know, it was a side trip just to take a picture of the sign. And while we were sitting there, across the way was this. And there was this, and one thing we learned about Wales, at the lighthouses, there were almost no gift shops. And you know, if you've been on one of our tours, you know that one of people's favorite things is the gift shops. Well, by the time we got here, we're about 2/3 of the way through the trip, and people were gift shop starved, and they saw this gift shop department store, and they started, and we were late, you know, because of something that had taken us longer than I thought, and it was probably, you know, just taking the time to go up to the Great Orme and all that kind of thing. People were begging, please, please give us some time. But I said, okay, you got a half an hour. Well, that was a pipe dream, you know. There was a big crowd roared into this place. This place never saw so many people come in there at once. People were just grabbing stuff. And by the time, but the problem was, it took forever to check people out. But, you know, people who are on this tour will remember this place. The next couple of lighthouses, just go through quickly here. These lighthouses were built to guide ships into the Mersey or into the River Dee on this side. There was a high and low light here. This was the high light. We actually, you know, went inside this light. The owner gave us a talk. His wife brought us snacks, which was really appreciated. The one on the left over here is a residence. Now we did not go inside that one, but these were the two lights that helped guide ships into these ports down here. And then the Planet Lightship, which was actually on the, you know, when we went there, we thought, we saw this, it's actually docked down here on the Mersey, but it was stationed out here on what was called Bar Liverpool. We thought the word bar on the side just simply meant it was a bar, but it turns out, as we know, that, you know, the name of the light station is what is painted on the side of the lightship. And even though this was originally christened the Planet Lightship, the word bar was because that was the name of the station out on the Mersey Bar or out on this Liverpool bar. So, but the interesting thing is, at this time, it was a bar and cafe. But since then, I understand it's been moved, and it's been moved back to England. There was all kinds of issues about ownership and whatever, and I'm not sure exactly what the status of it is right now. And there's a picture of it as it was, you know, in 2016, across from our hotel. All right, now, obviously when you're in Liverpool, 90% of everything is all about the Beatles. See, I got to show our mascot for our tours is Bosley. This is Bosley. If you can see him in our picture up here, there he is. And Bosley got in this picture. You see Bosley on Ringo's shoulder over here. Actually, Mary Lee was standing here, but I photoshopped her out of it. And you know, as Jeremy, you know, talked about it at the beginning, you know, the Beatles experience. You know, actually, the Beatles experience was right next to our hotel, and right outside our window. You know, I can't remember which song they were. Oh yeah, they played the Yellow Submarine all day. Fortunately, at 10 o'clock at night, they closed down. But I was pretty tired of hearing about the Yellow Submarine. I'm put in here just to show this peninsula, which was really on with the two lighthouses there. But River Mersey is here. The Wirral Peninsula is here, and there's been a ferry crossing this particular river for, okay, I got to look this up again, since the 12th century. And of course, most of us are familiar with the song by Jerry and the Pacemakers. You know, how's that start? Oh, Mersey crossed the river. No, ferry crossed the Mersey. And of course, we had to do that while we were there. This is what the ferry looks like now. I'm sure it looked a little different in the 12th century. And you talk about something else. If you got on this, it went across to the other side. It went down a ways to another port and then came back. So it just kind of, you know, did this little circle. And today, of course, I mean, if you want to get to the other side, it's you know, it's an easy way to get there. But it was mostly tourists, and every time it docked, it played that song, and that got pretty old after a while too. I was looking at the words of this song, and it talks about, you know, going across the Mersey, you know, to the land I love, and I can't figure out which way that was, which direction that they were going. Was that, you know, the peninsula side, or was it the Liverpool side? This is a picture of the waterfront at in Liverpool, and the famous Three Graces of Liverpool, made up of these three buildings. The Port of Liverpool, a building on the right, which was originally the headquarters of the Mersey Docks and Harbor Board, which today is just a lot of local businesses. The Cunard Building, which used to be the former headquarters for the cruise, the Cunard Cruise Line. Today, it's the British Music Experiences in there, which is sort of a British Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Building down here is the Liverpool Museum, and this one, the Liver Building, pretty interesting, kind of the signature landmark of Liverpool, particularly with the two liver birds on top. These two liver birds have names. They are Birdie and Bernie. Birdie's the woman, Bernie's the guy. The birds are holding a sprig of it's called laver, which is actually a seaweed. And they say that the name of the bird, the liver bird, probably got its name from the seaweed that that shows holding it in its mouth. Now there are a number of legends and about these two birds. If you look at them, they're facing away from each other. Again, one male, one female, and the legend is if they turned around, they would see each other and fall in love and mate. And then if they mated, they would fly away. And if they flew away, the city of Liverpool would cease to exist. So that's the story there. The other legend about them is that the female is looking out to sea, watching for the seamen, waiting for the seamen to return home safely. But the male is watching over the seamen's families and making sure that the pubs stay open. So that's why those particular birds were, fascinating information, that we caught on some of the tours, because we spent a whole day in Liverpool. Real quick, two huge churches. The Catholic Church here, which is relatively new, the fifth largest cathedral. No, that was the other one. This is the one that holds 2,000 people so they can see the altar inside. We actually did not go inside. This was off a postcard or something. I think it was we didn't have time or whatever. But the other church we did go inside, which is the Liverpool Anglican Cathedral. Now this is the fifth largest cathedral in the world. The length of this one is a couple of football fields, and it's got the one of the world's tallest non-spired churches. So there's no spire on this, just big tower. And wouldn't you know, when we went there, because we wanted to climb in this spire, because we heard about the bells in this spire, and there was a graduation going on. And so we had to kind of sneak through, from the left side here all the way across to where we could actually take a trip up to the spire, actually, or up to the tower. And fortunately, it had an elevator part way. The rest of the way you had to climb stairs. But we got rewarded with this set of bells, which was just awesome. The big one in the middle here was called Great George. Every bell, they had this diagram there which showed each of the bells has a name. Each bell has a different tone and the different weights of each bell. Now the bells around the side would ring, during the year for probably on Sundays. But Great George was only rung twice a year, Christmas and Easter. And I thought, my gosh, what it would have been like to be in that tower when all those bells were ringing. I'm not exact. I'm sure that each one's got its own little wheel that would cause it to chime. Fascinating though to be able to see this. And when you got to the top, there's the Liver building down here, and you can see the river down here. I can't remember what this is down here. It may be a college of some sort or just apartments. Radio tower, of course, which kind of ugly in the middle of all this. Okay, now we're going to go to the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man sits right in the shipping lanes coming from Glasgow and Belfast. And in 1815, Trinity House in Britain made a deal with the Isle of Man and the Northern Lighthouse boards. They wanted to have a lighthouse built here at the top and one down here. When we get over there, you'll realize this is Chicken Rock and this is Point of Ayr. But the traffic that was coming from Glasgow and the Firth of Clyde, they wanted this light coming around this way, and over it, particularly coming from Ireland, then lighting the two ends of this particular island, which is why, again, these lighthouses are where they are. A little bit about the five major lighthouses on the Isle of Man. Again, they were, when you see them, if you've ever been to Scotland, you'll just feel like you're in Scotland. They were all designed by the Stevenson family. Right now, they're all either privately owned or they are bed and breakfasts. The light towers themselves, of course, are still under the jurisdiction of the Northern Lighthouse Board, but the surrounding land is all private. And this is probably what gave us the greatest challenge, was to be able to not just get, we had to cross private land to get to the lighthouse, and then to be able to climb the lighthouse was our other goal. But the Northern Lighthouse Board, we worked with them. We had to get permission signed by the owners of all 4 pieces of property. We had to sign liability waivers. I had to create a safety, what I called it, a safety plan, for people, this is what you have to do when you walk on this property and all this. And finally, we got the permission. And then the Northern Lighthouse Board also arranged for Fred Fox, who is their attendant for these lighthouses on the Isle of Man to meet us at every one and open them up and allow us to climb them. I mean, you talk about something coming together, it was pretty much awesome. Not only that, the first night we were in Douglas, the commissioner that was, the Irish Lights Commissioner that was, or the Scottish Lights Commissioner that was in charge of the Isle of Man, met us there, had dinner with us, and I understand now he's the chairman of the Northern Lights boards. We talk the Isle of Man, which is like is a British Crown dependency. If you were with us on the Brittany tour, it's just like the Channel Islands, the bailiwick of Jersey and Guernsey, which means they're pretty much independent except for defense, and they have their own currency. And as we found out on Jersey, if you get currency on the Isle of Man, you better spend it there, because when you get back into Wales or back into Liverpool, it's pretty hard to get rid of it. Most people that had it tried to get rid of it on the ferry on the way back. That didn't work real well either. This symbol here for the Isle of Man, the Triskelion, it's a three-legged character, all joined at the thigh. And what it says down here, basically it says no matter which way you throw it, it will land upright. And it basically, the way I understand it, or what we were told there, means that the island always lands on its feet. So no matter which way they get thrown, they'll always land on its feet. But boy, you see this thing everywhere. These were the lampposts on, in the city of Douglas on the Isle of Man, and they had them, all on there too. The Isle of Man's known for a number of things. One of them is it's called the TT, which is the tourist trophy, which is a cross-country motorcycle race. And I guess 2 weeks, fortunately, we weren't there during this, because I guess it's sort of like Sturgis, with motorcycles, or, like France gets with the Tour de France. But this is considered to be one of the most dangerous cross-country motorcycle races in the world. It's referred to as 38 miles of terror. We saw some of where the roads were for it, and there was a lot of things related to as they just refer it to as the T. But again, once a year they get a lot of people there. The Manx cat, which is native to the island, cat without a tail. They're evidently very skilled hunters. Farmers like them because they're very great mousers and catchers of rats. One of the stories that one of the guides told us there was that during the tourist season, especially during this TT, that tourist trophy, that people that have these cats hide them, because tourists try to steal them, because sometimes they're pretty hard breed to find, and people will steal them and put them in their backpacks and carry them back to England. So during the T, I guess you can't find these cats. And then the Isle's also known for the birth of these three guys, because this is where the Bee Gees were born. All right, when we left Liverpool, we were on this particular ship right here. Notice again the Isle of Man symbol here. We got on we're on the bus, and we told our bus driver, we saw this. They said, stop at the top and then goose it going down, which is down onto the ship. And then of course we all had to pretend like we were on a roller coaster, having a big old time flying down that particular. Coming back up wasn't as much fun. When we got to the island, the first thing you see is this, it's called a Tower of Refuge, was actually originally built as a shelter for shipwreck victims until help could arrive. They would actually, stay in this little tower down here. It was referred to as the Tower of Refuge or the Conister Rock Tower, because there was a rock. Obviously, it's sitting on a rock. And then the other thing you see coming into the harbor is the Douglas Head Lighthouse, the Pier Lighthouse down here. And again, you can tell that the Stevensons designed this particular lighthouse, particularly because of the black cap, lantern room, and that yellowish, I don't know what color it actually is, of parts of the lighthouse and the keeper's house. This was the last lighthouse we went to also, and we'll get back to that in just a second. The first day we were on the Isle of Man, we had to get to the Calf of Man, which is this little island off the southwest coast. This was another challenge. We could only find 2 boats to take us down there. Each one would hold, I believe it was 12, and we had too many people, but some people said, I ain't going anyway, because originally they told us, well, there's 3 things that can happen. First of all, the weather may be such that these small boats can't make it. The second one is if you land at this end of the island, it's a pretty good hike down to the other end and then back, and you'd almost have to run to get down there and then get back. And the third possibility was a good, decent weather, you could actually land down here, and I believe it was actually more like right here, which was very close to where the lighthouses were. Well, the gods were with us, and the 2 boats were here in Port St. Mary, and this was the boat. Now, again, kind of a difference from some of the ferries that we get in, but as most of you know, we'll do anything to get to an offshore lighthouse. And one reason I remember this is it was cold. I was sitting up here, and the guy had some kind of a heater up here, and it just fried my right leg. The rest of everybody was cold. My leg was so hot, and here was our crew. Now tell me this guy doesn't look like somebody that should be should be captaining this boat. We never did figure out if this was his wife or his girlfriend or just part of the crew. Ian, the guy in the middle, is the warden out on the Calf of Man, who met us when we got there, and kind of guided us around and told us a little bit about the area. Again, we had to worry about the tides. Not quite as bad as they were back, in around the Severn. But again, as you can see down here, this is where we pulled that boat in. And if the tide had been much lower, we wouldn't have got in. And if it was higher, I'm not sure they would have even gone. This is a picture of the 3 lighthouses that are on the Calf of Man. This was the original high light. This was the original low light. These were both built back in 1819. They only lasted, they lasted until 1875 when they built the Chicken Rock, which we'll get to here in a second. But eventually, after these were deactivated, in 1968, the Northern Lights Board built this structure right here with this tower on it and added a light there, which now is in addition to the one at Chicken Rock. This is a closer up picture of the highlight. These lighthouses were actually in pretty good shape for something that was built, back in 1819. I mean, you're talking about something that's over 200 years old. We couldn't get inside, but the towers were in, relatively good shape. Although, in talking to the warden, he said, they've been deteriorating through the years, and there really is no plans to do anything about it. Out here, you can see Chicken Rock, which was one of the lighthouses that Trinity House asked to be built out here on the northern, around the southern tip of the Calf of Man. And this is that new building that was built, obviously looking more, from something from the 60s, but it's inactive now. And the only active light is at Chicken Rock, which is out here. We've traveled, a lot around, the British Isles and have seen a lot of these what are called rock lighthouses because they're built on rock. But this first one that we've been able to see that didn't have this on the top of it looked like this. All the other ones we've seen have had that helicopter pad. I know there are still ones with the lantern room, but it was nice. It was kind of exciting to see one that still had the original lantern room on it. It's still an active aid to navigation. After we went here and came back to Port St. Mary, we ended up over here at the Langness Lighthouse. If you look at this old map up here, this lighthouse is right here, right on the tip of this finger that sticks out, which kind of explains why it's there, because ships coming around this way, would be able to see this and would be able to steer clear of it. I can't say much more about this particular lighthouse. Again, it's now rented as a vacation rental. Obviously, again, a Stevenson lighthouse, same coloring. Most of these lighthouses there, these, the major ones in really pretty good shape. And the, I had one other thing I was going to. Oh, all I wrote down here is you can rent this one for £660 a week. I looked that one up. I do remember walking to this one. This one was a pretty good hike. For those of us that walked out here to the Calf of Man and then here, and our coach driver was talking into not driving further down, being told he wouldn't be able to turn around. Turned out he could have, but we all survived anyway. Here's another shot of the same lighthouse and picture of the fog signal building with one of those pretty large trumpets on them. The last lighthouse and the one, again, the Trinity House asked to be built at the northern end of the island at Point Ayre. That's A-Y-R-E. This is the northernmost point on the Isle of Man, and it's also the closest point to the British mainland, which from this point to the British mainland is about 16 miles. The name A-Y-R-E is from Welsh, which actually, means gravelly beach. In a second here, we'll tell you why that's the case. This is the only lighthouse that we saw that had red and white stripes, which is kind of unusual, again, for a Stevenson lighthouse. I don't know when they put the stripes on it, but it obviously then becomes a better day mark of something at the northern end of the island. This was kind of an unusual fog signal, two large fog horns with this odd-shaped building. We were not inside it, but kind of different from the other ones that we've seen with this kind of, well, I can't start to talk about the other one. The little one down here is known as Winky. And if you get a closer look at that, this was the low lighthouse, and all there was to it originally was this bottom part and this top part. And it was about 250 yards from the high lighthouse, from the Point Lighthouse. But over time, this beach grew and grew bigger and bigger as gravel. Evidently, the currents off here are pretty, swift, and the beach just kept getting bigger and bigger. So they had to move the lighthouse about another 250 yards down. And so at that point, they added this to the top of it, and then put the lantern back on. So you ended up with this kind of two-stage lighthouse down here. If I remember correct, it's like you could buy this. I'm not exactly sure why you would want to, but and because the main lighthouse now is a private residence or a bed and breakfast. Because I remember we were talking to people at that particular location, but a really cool location. The stairs to the top had nice railing. This was one of the taller lighthouses, although the Chicken Rock Lighthouse was the tallest lighthouse, both on the Isle of Man and also in Wales. And this was our last chance to take our group photos, so we took advantage of a fairly decent day and an ability to get, you know, the lighthouse in there. But then these are our mugs, you know, a little bit closer up. Down the coast, Stronghold Head. This one, typical of when you build a couple of lighthouses. The one at Point of Ayre and Point Douglas had this dark, stretch in it, and that's when they built this particular lighthouse. This one is perched on a, you know, unlike the other ones, this is the only one that, you know, you really had to climb down to or up to on the Isle of Man. And it was and the tower is 77 feet tall, but again, the focal plane over 200 feet. These are the steps down to it. Again, you know, the same Stevenson design lighthouse. This is, oh, there's Cheryl and, help me. Cheryl, what's his name? Bob, that's right, sorry, Bob. And this is me down here, watching everybody climb down and back up. I'd have climbed down, but then I would have had to climb to the top of this and climb down and back up. I was pretty pooped by then. But again, all these buildings here were sold and they were being renovated for some purpose that we had no idea. I did hear that recently that that they had renovated more, but what they've turned it into, I have no idea. The last lighthouse that we saw is this one at Douglas that we saw on the way in. Only thing different I can point out here, there's a tower up here. It was called the Herring Tower. That originally this was a day mark on the island even before the lighthouses were built, which, you know, which mariners could then see and use there. There was also one at Point back at Langness. There was one also there. It became part of a hotel. Then they tore the hotel down, and these are apartments, but it's still part of that. The lighthouse itself, again, keeper's quarters attached to the lighthouse. It actually is a pretty nice lighthouse. This one you had to climb down to, or you climbed down to the beach and then climbed back up because it sat out on this point. But if you remember now, those 4 lighthouses, the 4 Stevenson ones, it's like when they came there, they just kind of, you know, built them all together. The last attraction we saw on the tour was the Laxey water wheel, the largest working water wheel in the world with a 72-foot diameter. There were mines on the Isle of Man that produced lead and copper and zinc. But the problem was they had to find a way to pump water out of these mines so they could get down there and get those minerals. There's no coal on the Isle of Man, so they couldn't build steam-powered pumps. So they built this water wheel and filled an uphill from here. They had a cistern that dropped the water into the buckets on the wheel, turned the wheel, which then turned the pump that pumped the water out of those mines so that they could get to those particular metals. The mines were only a couple hundred feet away from here, but were as deep as 1,500 feet. They actually had a little visitor center here where it showed those mines in a model, and it was pretty fascinating. If you look at this, this is it from the front, and if you see back here, you know, this leads back to the mines itself. Take a look at the Triskelion on here. You notice anything different about it? If you look at it, this is what it's supposed to look like, but it's actually a mirror image of it. And what they didn't discover this till they put it up there, and that they actually had it on backwards, you know, turned around. They decided they just leave it there anyway. So, you know, I didn't notice this when we were there. And when I was looking up, you know, some information about the water wheel, it came up that this thing was on there backwards. And I thought, wow, there's something I didn't know. But if those of you who were there remember, it was raining pretty good when we were here, and really didn't have much time to stand around and gape at. Well, that's pretty much it. This is Dorian. He was our bus driver. He was quite a character. Hated fish, hated being near fish, would not sit at a table if you were eating fish. He just, when we were on the Isle of Man, which is fairly well known for its kippers, he had to park the bus by a factory that canned them, and he couldn't even stay there. So he was pretty cool. Stan and Betty Meyer, I only put this in here because you could always tell where they were, because I think these things lit up in the dark. I could tell where Stan and Betty were. They were pretty much always together. This is Fred Fox. He was our godsend on the Isle of Man. Showed up every time we wanted to get into a lighthouse, waited as long as we wanted. He was just the nicest guy. This is Leanne Nitschke. I know she's watching, This is Leanne. This is her sister and her brother-in-law. Now, when we met these two at the welcome dinner, Leanne's a doctor, her sister's a nurse, and Nathan is a minister. So we said, we are covered on this tour. We got a doctor, a nurse, and a minister, and so we were safe. Now, the weather didn't turn out as good as we had hoped. We blamed that, of course, all on Nathan. But anyway, it was great having them on this trip. And this is Sarah. She was our guide from Wales, very knowledgeable about particularly about the castles in Wales. We were a challenge for her. She even told us, she normally took small groups, that you would fit into a van around. And in fact, a group of 30 or whatever we were, was a little more unwieldy. And then finally, I'll leave you with this. There is a toast in Mansk that says, health and peace and life of life and happiness forever. So tonight, when you're toasting at your happy hour, I'm not even going to try to say this. I was bad enough in French. This is even worse. But I will say no stop, which means good night, and that'd be it. So I'm out.
Okay. Thank you so much, Skip. We can't hear them, but everybody's applauding. That was fantastic. That was great, as I knew it would be. So we're gonna do some Q&A in just a moment. So I hope a lot of you can stay. Also, Skip extended an invitation to the people who are actually on the tour to stay afterwards. There's going to be a secret club meeting following the big meeting. But everyone is welcome to stay if you want to. But anyway, those of you who are on the tour, I think you got that message that Skip would like to talk with you after this event. So I also, before we do the Q&A, I want to mention that just before we started, I got an email from Kim Phelan, who's a lighthouse historian and author, and she told me something interesting. There was a TV series, a mini-series done around 2004 called Island at War. It was about the German occupation of the Channel Isles and the area that Skip talked about a couple of weeks ago in his last tour presentation. But it's set on a fictional island, but it was actually shot on the Isle of Man. And I guess the Point of Air lighthouse that Skip showed, the one with the red and white stripes, is seen pretty prominently in the series, and sounds really interesting. So Island at War, I'm going to seek that out. She said it's available on Amazon Prime if you get that. So we're going to do the Q&A. There's two ways you can ask questions if you'd like to. One is through the chat. Those of you familiar with Zoom know about the chat option down at the bottom of your controls. You can click chat and the chat window will come up, and you can ask questions in there, and we'll look for your questions and forward them to Skip or whoever you want to ask the questions of. And also you can raise your hand to ask a question. So I always have to think about this because I can't see it with the host controls. Jeff, I don't know if you want to help me with this, with the raising hand option. You want to say something about that? How does it work? Just click participants, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if you click participants, it should come up over on the right an option to raise your hand, which means digitally raising your hand. And you can see the queue, and we'll call on you. We'll have to ask a question using that method, and you can unmute your microphone. So don't physically raise your hand, but do the digital raising hand option if you can. Does everybody see what I'm talking about? Well, Don Broadbent looks like he has a question. He's trying to raise his hand, but let me find your name here, Don. Well,
Oh, cool.
what I'm talking about is digitally raising your hand.
Sorry.
I clicked ask to unmute. Don, you should be able to unmute yourself. Don Broadbent, you should be able to click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Do you see how to do that? Don, can you see how to, down in the lower left, you should see a microphone icon that says mute. If you, or it says unmute. If you click on it, you should be able to unmute yourself.
No, Don.
Hi, this is Don.
Hi, Don. Did you have
Can't
a question?
talk.
Did you have a question?
I'm muted or something.
No, we hear you.
We can hear you.
We hear you loud and clear.
You can hear me loud and clear?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hi, Skip and Jeff, and I finally got on, Jeff.
Hey there.
Hi, Don. You remember this tour, Don?
Oh, yeah, very well. You guys did a great job. And say hi to Merle.
They're right here.
Okay, thank you, Don.
I don't think that was a question, Jeremy.
No,
It wasn't quite a question.
good comment.
Yeah, very nice comment. Thank you, Don. We appreciate that. And I muted you again. If you want to say something else, let us know. But I don't see any digital hands raised with questions. Here's a question on the chat. Actually, it's to me privately, but I'll pass it along. From David and Linda, did you visit? Oh, geez. Caernarfon or something to that effect? Castle?
Yeah. No, that would, we had to draw the line somewhere in terms of time. We went to Kidwillie Castle, but Caernarfon, I think it was. No, that's closer up toward. I think that's up towards. We stayed there, didn't we? It's up toward Liverpool. Mary, did we stay in Caernarfon?
It's not. It's not. It's on the Straits. It's the most important castle that Edward I built. It's the largest castle in England.
Oh, okay.
It's where Prince Charles was invested. He became Prince of Wales there.
Ah, okay.
Very important castle, and I'm sorry you didn't get to see it.
You know your British history. Thank you.
Well, we spent like 5 days in Wales last year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, David. So there's another question in the chat from Gillian Bagwell. What was the name of that series again? That was World at War series about the occupation of the Channel Isles. Which
The World of what?
World at War.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
Island
at War. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Island at War. Yeah, Island at War. And
So that's a mini series?
Yeah, and it's shot on the Isle of Man, but takes place on a fictional island in the Channel Isles. We have a couple of hands raised. Deborah Wilder, you are now unmuted. So Deborah, you can go ahead and ask your question.
First of all, I'd like to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this tour. You've done a wonderful job, Skip, of presenting everything. And my question is, do you have another one of these tour retrospectives scheduled?
Me personally? You have to talk to Jeff.
We've been doing
Anybody?
We've been doing them every couple of weeks. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks from today, we'll have another one presented.
Thank you.
The next one that I'd like to do is when we went to, it was the English tour where we ended up going out to the Eddystone Lighthouse. And because that was like getting to the mothership. It was also a nightmare for anybody that was a pretty rough ride. But that whole part of England and it was the Scilly Isles too, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually
if he wants me to do that, I'll do that one. But
it was actually called the Isles of Scilly.
the Isles of Scilly.
Sounds like something out of Monty Python.
Yeah.
So when you do
off the coast of Land's End in England, southwest England.
when you do the
I'll never forget Eddystone.
sorry, who's speaking?
On the group. And also, I remember the first tour that you went and did this same thing. Where you went
Oh, it's Nancy is speaking. Hi, Nancy. I was trying to figure it out.
out of turn, but that's me. Oh, well.
That's okay.
Well, you went to the Eddystone. I think you got sick.
Well, it was quite an experience. Ocean. Yeah, but I look forward to seeing all the pictures again, and especially the Scilly Isles. That was fabulous. So we'll look forward to that. Thank you, and thank you for today.
Thank you, Nancy. Nice seeing you. You were on the, we spoke a lot on the England and Scotland tour 3 years ago, so good to see you. Barbara Paley has a question.
Yes. First, thank you for today. It was wonderful. And I would love to see the Eddystone adventure. Adventure. But for today's, how long was this tour? The Isle of Man, etc.
16 days, was it?
It depends. You know, we always go early. I think we were gone 21 days, but I think it was, you know what?
I think it was 16.
16 days. And I think we spent 4 or 5 nights on the Isle of Man. That was actually kind of my favorite part of it, because whenever you can stay in the same hotel more than one night in a row, it's very important. And so we spent the whole time in the same hotel on the Isle of Man. Do what?
Thank you. It was wonderful to take the trip vicariously with you.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of fun.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Jeff.
The trips internationally tend to be longer because we've tried operating shorter international trips, but once you're there, we'll have extensions, and it never fails. Everybody always signs up for the extension, so we just make the tours longer because once you're there, you want to see everything or see as much as possible. So the European trips tend to be a lot longer than domestic tours.
By the way, speaking of England, the lighthouse behind me, some of you might recognize, it's Longstone Lighthouse off the east coast of England, and that's one of the places we went to on the 2017 Scotland-England tour, and I think it's one of the best lighthouses I've ever visited, just incredible.
Yeah, Jeff, we should do that one. Have Jeremy do that. He was on that trip.
No, you do it, Skip, but I could chip in with a little bit. You were the tour leader.
It was that, we had gotten to lighthouses on virtually every kind of a vehicle, but the first time I ever rode on a Unimog. Remember we went down to Spurn Point on a Unimog. Oh
yeah.
It'd be worth joining us vicariously just to watch us ride a Unimog.
On the Wales tour, that was actually the second time the society did it, the one that Skip and Mary Lee led. My wife Melissa and I went on one a few years prior to that. I think a number of the members of the society who are on this call went on that one too. On that trip, we actually made it to Caldy Island. And Caldy Island was one of the most memorable places I've ever been.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Not just because of
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, not just because of the lighthouse, which I got an amazing photograph of Melissa and I that hangs in our office inside the lantern room, but it's the monks there actually are known for making chocolate. And that was part of the fun, being able to sample all the chocolate and go see a lighthouse, two of my favorite things. So if you ever get a chance to go back to Caldy Island, it's worth the trip.
It'll be raining.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Jeff. Has the society ever done any tours in South America? I can't remember.
Oh yeah, we've gone to Argentina and Uruguay.
Okay.
And we tried to go to Brazil, but we had some troubles on that one. But we were actually talking about doing another one to Uruguay, because that was an amazing trip.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I happen to know there's somebody from Colombia in the room here, so I was just wondering. But there's not a lot of lighthouses in Colombia, like the other countries.
The culture down there, and especially in Uruguay, and the lighthouses are incredible, and the people are wonderful, and the food's amazing. There's
Sure.
every reason to travel down to South America for sure.
Yeah, yeah, sure, that'd be great. I don't see any other questions. Speak now or forever hold your peace, everybody. I don't see any questions in the chat or any hands raised. So I guess at this point, we can turn it over to Skip, and anybody who's on the tour might want to stay and have a reunion. The rest of you, again, if you want to hang out and be part of you can sort of peek at the secret meeting here of the tour goers. You don't have to know a secret handshake or anything. So those of you who are leaving now, thank you so much for being here today. We hope to see you again in a couple of weeks. And this event right now will be posted online within a few days on the USLHS YouTube channel and also on the USLHS website. So if you want to relive the experience, will be posted within a few days. And the other 4 that we've done are posted on there as well. So again, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. Thank you.